Good day, Lionhearts. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said well. You know, I was thinking there are two movies that I really love, and I realized that they were actually about the same person. Johnny Depp and Jack Nicholson both played the same person. Now this guy, for close to 15 years, was hiding out in plain sight in Santa Monica, and he was the #1 most wanted person on America's Most Wanted list. So today we're gonna go see where this person was captured, how they managed to elude the police, the FBI, everyone for so long, over 15 years, but in Santa Monica, close to 15 years in Santa Monica in the same apartment. And then I'm gonna tell you how they ended up capturing this person, what led it to him, or how they were led to this person, and then how they did the apprehension. Daze with Jordan the Lion, it begins now. Let's go to Santa Monica and talk about James Whitey Bulger. Let's roll. I was extremely shocked to find out how close to the 3rd Street Promenade Whitey Bulger lived, because that's an extremely populated, kind of touristy area here in Santa Monica. Just to give you a little taste of his neighborhood. About 2 blocks from the beach. Check out the topiary here. Dolphins. Nice. So here's a little bit of the story of Whitey Bulger if you're not familiar with him. And like I said, if you saw Black Mass, Johnny Depp plays him in Black Mass, and if you saw The Departed, Jack Nicholson portrays him in that. Now, Whitey Bulger was a crime figure in South Boston for many years. He was an extortionist, a drug dealer, and a murderer. And was also one of those people that kind of had their hand in both cookie jars, where he was paying FBI agents to keep him informed as to, you know, when they were closing in on him, but he was also an informant to the FBI. So in the end, Whitey Bulger was a pretty despicable person to everyone, because he ended up killing a lot of innocent people, and he also was in the crime business. He was considered a rat at the end. But what happened was he got tipped off right before the FBI was going to close in and apprehend him in 1995. He bought someone's identity and then started kind of traveling around from New York to Chicago, and then ended up finding a place in Grand Isle, Louisiana, and was then chased out of there. So after that, the FBI really had no idea what happened to him and where he ended up. But what he did was he assumed another identity. Apparently he found a homeless man in a park in Santa Monica here, purchased his identity, I guess that would have been like the social security number, and became Charlie Gasco. And his girlfriend, Catherine Gregg, would become Carol Gasco. And the Gascos would live under the radar for 14 years in the apartment building I'm going to show you right now. So in this building right here, in 1997, Whitey Bulger and Catherine Gregg got a rent-controlled apartment here, actually right in room 303 at the very top in that right corner. And for the next 14 years lived in that apartment, living a very, very low-key life, even though they, you know, obviously in order to get groceries and things they would have to go out and live. Other than that, they didn't live extravagantly. They apparently never had food delivered or anything. But 1997 they took over this apartment, and the police, the FBI, just had no way of finding Whitey Bulger. For one thing, they didn't know what he looked like. He had, you know, over the years, they had no updated photos or anything to even know who they were looking for. And his tracks had pretty much run cold, as you can imagine, being someone involved in the mafia. He not only was able to plan ahead and squirrel away what they would eventually find over $800,000 up in there, but he also knew people and had connections, so it probably made it a little bit easier to do this. But basically how they ended up finding him and how they ended up apprehending him was by his girlfriend Catherine. She didn't give him up or anything. They were, she was his companion and caretaker and everything. They, while living here, would tell people in the building that Charlie was suffering from the early stages of dementia, and so they would very rarely talk to anyone, well, he would at least, and they would have a sign on their door that said "Do not disturb." But apparently Catherine was pretty friendly, well, Carol, as she was known here, and both Carol and Charlie, Whitey, loved animals, and so they would frequently take care of stray animals here, and that's kind of what ended up giving them up, was that the FBI put out looking for Catherine. So what they did was they had found out that she had at one point had a breast augmentation surgery. She had had a boob job, so they put the feelers out to all the doctors in the Boston area to see if they had her records, and eventually one did have her records and got them out of storage and called the FBI and said, "I have the records for you. Would you like the photos as well?" And they said photos. So they immediately rushed over and had at least somewhat recent photos within 10 years to start placing photos of Catherine on television shows as an America's Most Wanted person. So they started showing her picture on women's talk shows, and within a day of doing that, they got a phone call from someone who lived in Iceland and said that they used to live in this building, and that one of their neighbors, they felt, was Whitey Bulger and Catherine, and that they were known as Charlie and Carol Gasco here. So the FBI started looking into it and said, one of the tips, they said obviously when they talked to the former neighbor, they said that the ages and the physical description matched, and then the former neighbor said that they had a stray cat that they loved to take care of here, and the FBI knew that they were both fans of stray cats. So they came and talked to the manager here and put down a file and showed photos of Catherine and Whitey, and the manager did verify that they were living up here in room 303. So right across the street was a hotel called the Embassy, and so the FBI came and they took a couple of the rooms here and started spying across the street, as you can see, on Whitey and Catherine's apartment. And so what they did to devise a plan was they knew that Whitey was very likely stacked to the brim inside there with weaponry, and he was. So what they did was they had the manager call up to the apartment and say that the storage in their garage, you'll see that there's a garage entrance over here and then one over on the other side. Down there where they would park, they had a little storage space above their parking space. And so the manager called and said that someone had broken into their storage space and they needed either Catherine or well, it would have been Carol, either Carol or Charlie, to come down and verify whether anything was stolen. And so Catherine said that she would send him down, and he came down, and once he was down there in that basement, they apprehended him and immediately asked him to identify himself. And he said to the FBI agent, "Why don't you identify yourself?" And the agent said, "I did." And then he identified himself as James Whitey Bulger. And he said, "I told him to get down on his knees," and he said, "I'm not getting down on my effing knees," because he was wearing white and he didn't want to be humiliated by going down in the ground, you know, getting his pants or anything dirty. So right down here, while they had him apprehended, one of the neighbors from the third floor came down to check on our laundry and saw the FBI talking to him and went up and said, "Hey, disregard anything he says. He's suffering from dementia, so whatever he tells you probably isn't real." And so the FBI agent said, "Oh my God," immediately I was like, "Wait a minute, did I just, you know, maybe this guy isn't who I'm looking for." So he went and said to James Whitey Bulger, "You know, this lady over here is saying that you have dementia. Are you Whitey Bulger?" He said, "Don't listen to her, I am. I just want this to be over with," kind of thing. So Whitey and Catherine signed a paper saying, giving the FBI the right to go in their apartment, and when they went in there, they found tons of guns, different kinds of guns. They said Ruger, shotguns. It was just filled to the brim with artillery, and they were all loaded. And so they said they also had a bunch of cleaning products and like mouthwash and things like that, and he couldn't understand why, but he said he saw a bunch of cleaners, like industrial big size cleaner bottles with socks on top of them. And so he asked Whitey, he said, what are these, like Molotov cocktails or something? And he said, no, I buy my tube socks at the 99-cent store and I put them on there to stretch them out because they're too tight on my calves. And the FBI agent said, you got $500,000 underneath your bed. Why are you worried about tube socks from the 99-cent store? And Whitey said, I had to make the money last. So after being on the lam for 16 years, Whitey Bulger was now in FBI custody. And it's crazy. They said when they were told who he was living as, Charlie Gasco, and they looked into Charlie and Carol, they said they had no California identification, they had no driver's license or anything, so they very rarely left that apartment up there. They basically lived as kind of like shut-ins. But you have to believe, since the neighbor said they never got deliveries or anything, they did have to go to the grocery, so they were out and about and somehow just underneath everyone's nose. Now, when they went to trial, he received 2 life sentences and she received 8 years for harboring a criminal. The FBI said for that entire time that he was on the lam, he did nothing to break the law because he didn't want to get caught. And they said when they talked to him, his whole life goal for the rest of his life was just to not get caught. They said he said, you know, I told myself if I were sick or I were going to die or anything, I was just going to go off to Arizona and throw myself down a mine because I didn't want anyone to ever have the satisfaction of knowing that they captured me. But once he was sentenced and went into prison, when they unlocked the cell doors at 6 a.m., 4 men came into his cell with a padlock inside of a sock and beat him to death. And not only beat him to death, but they did it in a pretty violent way because the 2 of the men apparently that did it were former hitmen for the mafia and had no respect for rats. And so it was said that they entered his cell, removed his eyeballs, and attempted to remove his tongue. But he was beaten so badly that he was unrecognizable. So inside that final apartment, basically for 14 years, they lived as prisoners. And when they were removed from the apartment and everything, the FBI found, like I said, tons and tons of guns, but they also found over $800,000 in cash in the walls. And so amongst the victims that Whitey Bulger was accused of killing, he was actually accused of 19 murders. That was divided up amongst the families of those murdered. And that is how America's most wanted fugitive managed to escape the public eye for 15 years. And I noticed that this used to be known as the Princess Eugenia. They have removed the name, so I think they're trying to distance themselves from the notoriety of this building and of that apartment 303. Now here's one other weird little thing I guess you could attribute to Whitey Bulger, was that I once heard Joe Rogan say that Dana White, before being the head of the UFC and starting the UFC and everything, he was a boxing trainer in Boston, and Whitey Bulger's crew came in and tried to muscle in on the action, wanting a stipend or a payment, and Dana fled down, went to Las Vegas, and then eventually started the UFC. Well, since we're only 2 blocks from the beach, you want to go take a look at the beach? And as we're walking, look what I found. It's kind of cool. Kind of makes me feel like I'm back in Rome. We made it to Palisades Park. And how about a little view of the water? And they said that Whitey used to walk this park, so there you go. Ties into the story a little bit. And over on this side you can see the Santa Monica Pier. You know, I'll never understand this one. I will never understand how you have big enough guts to want to live in Santa Monica, one of the biggest tourist cities probably in the United States. I would think you would have wanted to go live off in the mountains somewhere, but man, wow. That's a long time to be on the lam in a very popular city. Look at the elevator on this old building. I love that. Kind of looks futuristic, but from like the 40s. Looks like a bullet up there. Well, we came to the park, but it is ultra windy here today. Here you can see how windy it truly is if you don't hear it, because they actually have wooden anchors to hold those chairs down. They still blew over. And he will pee on it. Don't pee on it! Hey, Ja, don't pee on that one. You can see how hard the trees are blowing over there. Can you get up here without getting blown away? You sure did. Good job, dude. Good job. Pretty windy today, huh? You're a champion. Okay, Ja, I think you've got the general scent. And now you get your reward. You've been to the park, now you get your peanut butter. Well, my friends, I think that's going to do it for today. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Veronica Arquette, for becoming my newest Patreon. And I think if we're going to try and end it on any kind of positive note, we'll let these two take us out. Take us out, fellas.